Starting Yu-Gi-Oh can be really difficult and intimidating for a new player. So we're going to try and bring you weekly tutorial videos from how we think that you should start playing the game and how you should progress weekly.
Yeah, so some step-by-step guides of how the game works, how the mechanics are, just everything that to get you going and get you ready to start playing.
Okay, so we're just going to show you a little duel video, which is here to show you how the game's played, like the phases which break up each turn, what you can and can't do in each phase, and yeah. So we've picked two very simple decks as well. So we've got Traptrix and Sky Striker. Both of these decks are very sort of beginner friendly. We really recommend starting with a deck like this. So yeah, we'll just go straight to it. So the game would start by shuffling your deck, obviously, and you also give your deck to your opponent to be able to shuffle. This will be expected if you were to go to a tournament. Obviously, it shows that you're not sort of like cheating, you're not stacking cards to the top of the deck. So yeah, and then you've got to decide on who's going first, or who gets the choice to go first. So that's usually done by a die roll. So I rolled a 3, Liam rolled a 2, so I get to choose whether I go first or second. I'm going to choose to go first. It is more typical for a player to choose to go first in Yu-Gi-Oh than second. There are some like certain strategies will specifically choose to go second, but they're less common than just going first strategies.
So you both start off with 5 cards. Obviously the person that goes first gets to pick first, but at this point you pick your cards up, both players, see what cards are in your hand, and obviously the person that is the turn player, they'll action everything first, so Jake will give you a demonstration of that.
So now the game's started, we're on my turn, and because I'm going first, we start in the draw phase, but in like the master draw that we're currently in, you no longer draw when you start the game going first. So I only start with 5 cards because I've chosen to go first. So then after the draw phase, you go into the standby phase. This is basically a phase that's here to give your opponent the opportunity to activate a card or effect before you've sort of done anything in your main phase. But it's very atypical for you to use anything in the standby phase of the very first turn. So we just go straight into the main phase. The main phase is basically where you make all of where you get to play all your cards basically. So in this case, I'm just going to normal summon a Traptrix Dino. This is an effect monster, but unfortunately at this point in the game, its effect isn't live. So what it does is, what it would usually do is on its summon, you can revive a Traptrix monster from the graveyard straight to the field. But obviously, not having played any monsters yet, we haven't got anything in the graves. But the reason that I've summoned it is to just link summon straight away into a Traptrix Serra. Traptrix Serra is like a link monster for Traptrix that requires only one Traptrix monster for its summon, but except for you can't use another copy of itself. Basically, it requires a non-link monster, and this is like a really powerful card because what it does is it says that if I activate a trap card, I can then, after the trap card resolves, summon a Traptrix monster straight out of the deck. So we're just gonna activate this now. So like with a trap card, you typically can't activate them the turn they're set, and you can't activate them straight from your hand. But this one is a little bit special. This one actually states that as long as I've got no trap cards in the graveyard, I can just immediately activate it. And why we do this is because that then triggers the effect of Serra. So now I've activated this trap, her effect activates, and then it lets me summon a Traptrix out of the deck. So yes, Serra lets us summon a Traptrix monster out of the deck, so I'm going to summon a Traptrix Mantis. And then what we're going to do now, because Traptrix Mantis has an effect as well, it's going to help us trigger the second effect of Serra. So I'm going to set a trap card and then activate Mantis. This lets me return a face down spell or trap card on the field to the hand, and then I'm allowed to set one directly, immediately afterwards. I'm not going to choose to do that, but the only reason I'm doing that is just to trigger the effect of Serra. So now she lets me set a trap hole card or a hole card directly out the deck. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a copy of Treacherous Trap Hole. These traps are really powerful, as you can only activate it if you have no other trap cards in your grave. But what it does is it lets me target 2 monsters the opponent controls and then destroys them. And then we're going to go into the extra deck again, but this time we're going to summon an XYZ monster. So the way that XYZs work is when you have 2 monsters on the field that are the same level, or you can sometimes see someone with 3 or 4 monsters, you basically stack them on top of each other like so, and then just stick the XYZ monster on top.
And then the way these XYZs work is the monsters underneath that you've used to summon them, they then become materials for this monster. So like every Link monster, every XYZ monster, they'll all have like different ways of being summoned or being able to summon them, and that will just depend on the deck's different strategy.
So yeah, I've summoned the Rafflesia, and then while I'm still in my main phase, I'm just going to set one more card face down, and then because you can't access your battle phase when you go first either, that basically becomes the end phase, and then because I've got nothing to activate in the end phase, it then goes to Liam's turn.
So yeah, obviously this would be my starting hand, so then during the same principle will happen, so you'll have a draw phase where if you go in second you'll draw a card, and then you'll have a standby phase which lets you activate any fast effects. I'll go over some of those once we actually go into them. And then you'd have the same phase where you go into your main phase, so this is where you can action pretty much everything that you've got in your hand. So with this one, I'm going to activate this reinforcement of the army, and this is going to let me search a level 4 or lower warrior. So then we'll search Sky Striker, Ace, Ray, and then these always go into your graveyard. So then this will be your hand next, and the way this deck kind of works is you'll go into one of like the smaller monsters, and then you will go into your Link monsters using the spells that they either search or get hold of. That's kind of how this deck works. So here we're going to use another spell card to send a spell card from the deck to the grave. I'm going to send Metal Foes Fusion. And a lot of the times once you've been into your deck to search, like a legal search, you'd often just give your opponent the deck back to cut, so there's obviously no way you can cheat and your opponent's happy that everything's going on with the deck that it should be. So then we'll use the grave effect of Metal Foes Fusion, which lets you shuffle it back into the deck and then draw a random card, which again you'd present the deck to your opponent, they'd cut it for you, and then you would draw a random card. So then while I'm still in the main phase, the next action I'm going to do is just normal summon Sky Striker, Ace, Ray. And then this is going to give us the access to a lot of the Link monsters in the deck, because this is kind of what the deck does. So then we're going to go into Hayate. And then Hayate has an effect that in the battle phase, it can attack directly. This is this Hayate's effect. And then once it attacks directly, during the damage step, it will send a Sky Striker card from my deck to the graveyard. So we're just going to go ahead and go into battle phase from the main phase. This is where the next phase is where both opponents have to agree that they're happy to go into the next phase, because Jake might have some effects that he might want to use before.
And there are some effects as well that, for instance, that you have to activate in the main phase. Like for instance, Effect Veiler, you can only activate it in the main phase of your opponent. So we have to come into an agreement that we have to leave the main phase to go into the battle phase, so that just in case, like for instance, I wanted to activate something like that. But we're happy to go into the battle phase.
So then we'd go into battle phase. So turn player would then have the option to declare an attack with however many monsters they have. But obviously this guy's got an effect where I can attack directly, so that's the action that I'm going to use. So I'll attack you directly.
In response to the attack, I'll activate Treacherous Trap Hole, and then I'll target Hayate and my own Sarah.
So this will destroy 2 cards. So this is just in the battle phase still, so there's no attack that's actually happened, and these 2 would die.
Trap Trick Sarah's actually got an effect as well where she's immune to trap cards, so she will survive, but then Hayate will still be destroyed.
But then the nice little interaction with this deck is like it always resolves around on getting a Sky Striker monster. So if the Sky Striker Ace monster leaves the field by battle or card effects from your opponent, this guy will just summon himself back out. So
and then this is going to be like the first chain as well that builds. So Scott, because it's Liam's turn, that means that he has turn player's priority, and because he's activating Ray, she then becomes chain 1. And then because I activated a normal trap card, I get to trigger Sarah's effect again, which summons another Traptrix monster out the deck. So then she's going to go as Chain Link 2, and then Liam will get a option to be able to respond to the effect of Sarah. So is that okay?
I think probably going to Ash this.
Yep.
So Ash Blossom is what we call a hand trap. So I've got 2 hand traps in my hand at this point. This is exactly what these kind of cards do, depending on whichever scenario is going to happen with your opponent. You can either negate a monster effect or stop a draw card, etc, etc. We'll go over some of those in a bit more detail. So then the chain will resolve with this negating this card, and then...
Yeah, because Chain Link resolve backwards as well. So so this is Chain Link 1, this is Chain Link 2, and now this is Chain Link 3. So now the chain resolves backwards, so that Ash will then negate the effect of Sarah. So then it will become Sarah's Chain Link, obviously the effect's negated, so that's sort of just like, it just resolves without effect, and then the Ray will resolve.
Yeah, as the Chain Link 1. So backwards it always happens reverse. So then Ray will summon itself out, and we're still in battle phase here, so because I've summoned a Ray in attack, it still means we can actually attack a monster. So that's what I'm going to do with Ray. I'm going to declare an attack on Traptrix Sarah.
So then I've got no response to the to that attack, so then Sarah will just die, and then I'll take damage equal to the difference.
Yeah, so like this, Sarah is at 800 attack, and then Ray is 1500 attack, so whatever the difference is the damage that you take, and obviously you both start on 8,000 life points, and it's the first person to get their life points reduced to 0 will lose. So then that damage will go through.
So then I'll take 700 off that.
And then because once that attack's final, we're still in the battle phase, so if we had multiple monsters we could perform multiple attacks, but Ray has an effect where I can quick effect activate it to tribute this card to then summon a different Sky Striker Ace monster from the extra deck. So I'm going to pick, this time I'm going to pick Shizuku, and we can summon that into either extra monster zone. And then at this point, if I wanted to, I could attack again if there was enough attack value versus the defense value, but this is quite high, so I'm not going to attack. So then I'd say I want to end the battle phase, and if Jake agrees, then it'll go on to the next step of the main phase, which would be main phase 2.
Yeah, so main phase 2 is fine.
So main phase 2, and this is very similar to the first main phase, where you can still activate some of your spells, some of your monster effects if you've not already normal summoned, etc, etc. So the only thing I want to activate here is multi-roll. This guy's effects has 2 effects where it can send a card that I control to the graveyard, and then your opponent cannot respond to your spell effects for the rest of that turn. It also has another effect where if I activate a Sky Striker card during the end phase, it will let me set the Sky Striker card face down. But I've not activated anything, so I'm going to move on to...
This card is also a continuous spell as well, so you'll be able to tell the different kinds of spells, traps and stuff by the symbol. That one's like an infinity symbol to signify that once you've activated it, it just sticks onto the board. It doesn't go to the grave unless it's destroyed.
So I'm going to try and enter the end phase. This is where still you can activate fast effects, monster effects. So in the end phase, my Shizuku has an effect where it can search a Sky Striker spell from the deck. So I'm going to activate Sky Striker's effect to search.
And I've got no response to that, so that's fine.
And then I'm going to search Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor. And this one has a fast effect symbol, so this means it can be used on your opponent's turn even though it's a spell. And because we're still in the end phase, I'm going to activate its effect and target Shizuku. So this would make this null, it would negate this effect, and then this would go to the grave. And then because we're still in the end phase, I'm going to trigger multi-rolls effect. So depending on how many Sky Striker spells that I've activated in the turn, I can then set them to my field. So it's just this one, and I'm going to set this Widow Anchor.
And so the reason why you'd go this way about doing it is because you can't just naturally set a spell or a trap in the end phase.
Exactly. So then I'd continue to end phase, pass turn.
So then it's my turn, so I actually get a draw phase now. So I'll draw a card from my deck. And then we'll go into standby phase, see if either of us have got anything we need to activate.
No, it's all fine.
So then we go into the main phase, and then I'll start by summoning Traptrix Diana again. I do believe that she can revive another copy of herself, so Yeah, so I'm going to null summon this, and then I'm going to target the Diana in the graveyard. And then it becomes Liam's sort of like window of opportunity to be able to activate a card. Otherwise, this is just going to summon back.
So here, this is during my turn. So I have a fast effect, a monster negation, and I also have a hand trap, which is also a very similar effect where it's a monster negation. So here I can think about whether I want to make an action on this to stop this from summoning this back. But I think at this point I'm quite happy with him summoning that back, so that's perfectly fine.
So then this revives, and then because this was special summoned, it's got a different effect. So like, depending on the way that you summon this, it does two different things. When this is special summoned, it will grab a trap hole from your graveyard and then just set it. But then if I haven't used this by the end phase of the next turn, this card just banishes itself. So I don't think we've spoken too much about banishing yet. But when a card gets banished, it's almost like it's being destroyed, just like it would be sent to the graveyard. But when it's banished, it's almost like it's like a second graveyard, which is a lot harder to access. So it's more like of a permanent graveyard, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
So then this sets, and then I've then got the option now where I could either turn one of these monsters into another Sarah if I wanted to do that, or I could actually overlay these two to summon another rank 4. So I think we're going to try and make a rank 4 because this card is pretty scary. Like the longer that card stays on the field, the more advantage that it will get Liam throughout the game. So you kind of want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So we'll just go ahead and make Tornado Dragon. Note as well that I'm summoning from the extra deck now to the main monster zones that aren't being pointed to by link monsters. Whenever you're summoning link monsters, you either have to summon them to the extra monster zones, or they have to go to a zone that a link monster points to.
Yeah, so like pretty much all of the link monsters, depending on their link rating, they'll have arrows pointing as part of their link rating. So that if this was a link 2, it might have an arrow here or 2 arrows here, etc., etc. But when you first summon a link monster, you always have to summon it into the extra monster zone. And then sometimes they give you arrows. So if this one pointed down here, then I could summon another link monster here. But with the XYZs, they can be summoned anywhere on the main monster zone. So there'd be 5 zones plus this extra 1 zone. So they can be summoned anywhere in either of those zones.
Yeah, so I've summoned the Tornado Dragon, and then this has got a quick effect where during either player's turn I can detach a material to target a spell or trap card on the field, and then it destroys the target on resolution. So I'll detach Diana and target the multi-roll.
So again, this is where I can activate any sort of either hand traps or fast effects. So I'm going to use my hand trap on this because I want this to survive. So you discard your hand trap, saying targeting this to negate that guy's effect. So then that chain link will resolve, so like nothing actually changes because he's tried to destroy and I've stopped the destruction.
And then because I haven't really got a lot left that I could do in the main phase now, I'm just going to go into battle phase. It's important to check your opponent's graveyard, especially when you're playing a deck like Sky Striker, because they actually have effects which are based on the amount of spell cards in the grave, for example. So because he has 2 spells, every monster that I would control loses like 100 attack for each spell. So this is actually like 1900 attack rather than 21, but 19 is still bigger than 15, so I'll declare an attack.
Yep, I'll let that go through. I'll lose 400 life points because that will be the difference, and my Sky Striker will die. But again, because I've got Ray in the graveyard, that will trigger, so I'll tell him that I want to activate Ray's effect to summon itself.
And then in response to the activation of Ray, I'll activate Grave Digger's Trap Hole. Now, this is also like another important part of the sort of like battle phase. So for instance, we're now in like what is referred to as the damage step, which is where Ray is going to trigger. And when you're in the damage step, there are very few different types of cards that can actually be used during the damage step. They have to be quick effects that do one of a bunch of things. So they either have to negate the activation of card effects, they have to alter stats,
attack or defense,
And I think that's like the majority of it. So because this negates the activation of the effect of Ray, I'm able to activate this in the damage step. So is there any response to the activation?
There's no response to that.
So then on resolution, this negates Ray's effect, and it's going to inflict 2,000 damage to Liam. And then, because Ruffalacia is in defense, obviously I can't declare an attack with it. And then I'm going to go into main phase 2, and then I'm going to set another card, and then I'm going to pass turn to Liam.
So then I could still use one of my fast effects, but there's no real reason to, so that's fine, and we'll accept that. And then we'll go into draw phase again, draw a card, and then standby phase, which is again where any fast effects can happen. And then I'll tell him that I want to go into main phase. And then during my main phase, all the same actions are open for me, so I'm going to activate my normal spell card to send a spell or trap from the deck to the graveyard. At this time he can have a response if he has a response.
No, that's fine, I think.
So then we're going to send Metal Foes Fusion, because that's going to give us a draw. And then this will go to the grave, and then I'll tell him I want to activate Metal Foes Fusion's effect to shuffle itself back and then draw a card.
So in response to the Metal Foes Fusion, I'm going to activate Trap Trick. So then what this says is I get to banish a normal trap out of my deck, and then I get to set a copy of the same card from my deck to the field. So what's going to happen is I'm going to banish this Artifact Sanctum, and then I'm going to be able to grab an Artifact Sanctum straight out the deck and set it. And then it has a cool stipulation where the card that you set off Trap Trick can be activated this turn, which obviously you wouldn't usually be able to do because it's a trap card. But then it also locks you out of trap cards for the rest of the turn. So after you've resolved Trap Trick, you can use the thing that you set, but you only get to activate one trap for the rest of the turn. And then this as well is what we would refer to as basically a misplay, because I've actually waited for a pretty poor opportunity to use this. Whereas if I'd done this in the standby phase, it would have meant that Liam wouldn't have had a chance to just summon Ray and go straight into the extra deck, because I'm going to try and lock him out of the extra deck with this card. And it also means that now I risk him drawing a card that can negate the Sanctum off the Metal Foes Fusion. So now your Metal Foes Fusion will resolve. Let's cut that as well.
Give it a shovel, and then your opponent will cut both decks. And then my Metal Foes Fusion will resolve, and I'll draw a random card. At that point the chains finish resolving.
And then on the resolution, there's sort of like a window where both players get to sort of activate something, so I'm going to activate Artifact Sanctum. And then fortunately I wasn't punished, because if Liam had drawn, for instance, a copy of Ash Blossom off the Metal Foes Fusion, that would have stopped the Artifact Sanctum, because what this card does is it summons an artifact monster out the deck, which Ash can negate. And then it also stops me from attacking the turn it activates, but because we're activating on the opponent's turn, that doesn't really matter.
So Sanctum's activated, summoning a Scythe. When Scythe gets summoned, Scythe will have an effect, which Jake's going to explain.
So the turn that this is summoned, it basically stops your opponent from summoning monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn.
But again, this is where I've got a window of response. So I've got a quick play face down spell. So I'm going to activate this, which has the similar effect of Widow Anchor, targeting this to negate its effects.
And then because you have three, do you have 3?
I think so, yeah. And then the second part of this effect, if I have 3 or more spells in the grave, then I can take control of that monster. So it negates it, makes it blank, and then I can pick a zone that I want it to go into. And then because this was set off a multi-roll, multi-roll's other effect is if it's already been set, then it gets banished the next time it's used. So here I'm just going to carry on with my main phase because there's no other responses, and normal summon my Ray. And then I'm going to attempt to go into battle phase.
There's no response to the battle phase.
So I'm going to declare an attack with Artifact Scythe on Tornado Dragon.
And then because this is a quick effect, I'm going to activate its effect. And then I'm just going to target the multi-roll to attempt to destroy it.
So that's what that will do, and that will go to the grave. So then this attack will still be declared.
And then I'll take 100 damage.
Yep, and then still in the battle phase, I'm going to use Raise Quick Effects to tribute itself, and then summon one of my Sky Striker monsters. So this one, when this one's summoned, it has an effect where I can target a Sky Striker spell in the grave and then add it back to my hand. So I'm going to pick a multi-roll. And then this also has another effect. Depending on how many spells are in the grave, it gains 100 attack for each spell. So I have 3 spells, so it's on 1800, which is not enough to kill the Raffles here. So then I will go into my main phase 2. And at this point, I can summon different Sky Striker Ace monsters as long as it's a different attribute. So this one's a fire, so I could summon a water or a wind or an earth, and I'm going to link this card off and then summon my Sky Striker Ace Shizuku. So while we're still in main phase 2, I'm going to activate my multi-roll and then set 2 cards face down. And then Widow Anchor's effect is during the end phase he will get this card back. So here, because there's multiple effects that I can resolve, I'm going to attempt to go into the end phase.
And then on the yeah, that's fine.
So opponent's free to go into end phase. So at first I'm going to resolve Widow Anchor. So my opponent's going to get his scythe back. He can pick which zone, and then I'm going to resolve my Shizuku, which is going to let me search a Sky Striker card. So again, I'm going to search Widow Anchor. And because it's in the end phase, I'm going to activate my Widow Anchor, and then I'm going to target Raffles here because this is already negated. So then this will go to the graveyard. Then I'm going to activate my multi-roll again to set this card. And then I'll pass turn.
And then in the end phase of this turn, because I didn't activate the Treacherous Tropple, Diana's effect banishes it. So then I'll draw for the draw phase. And then we actually drew the same card as we did last time. So at this point in the game now, it's going to be very hard for me to sort of like win the game. So what we have on the board now, so Rafflesia doesn't really do anything at this point. It's just like blocking damage essentially. If I attack with the scythe, then Ray comes out anyway. And then Liam is essentially just going to snowball advantage over the next few turns, and I have like no real way of getting back into the game, so I just concede the match.
Guys, thanks for watching. On next week's segment, we're going to be bringing you some deck building videos, how to build your deck ready for tournament play.
From scratch.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.